Hi everyone, this is Helenique Argeru, Peak Performance Trainer. Now, in my career of 22 years as a clinical psychologist, I often saw people who were very traumatized by the experiences they were having with their bosses, managers, or supervisors at work. It so happened that some of the time it was their own difficulty in dealing with authority or having people have control over their lives in some way. But sometimes it was also because the person that they were dealing with was actually a toxic boss, someone with bad boss behavior, someone that could potentially also be a narcissistic personality, somebody that actually is enjoying inflicting a certain kind of inferiority onto someone and making them feel inferior. Now, this is what prompted me to do these training seminars on toxic boss behavior. And I wanted to give you some really interesting statistics. In the US alone, where a lot of research is done just because of the amount of people in the country, there are some very interesting statistics where people actually call their bosses self-oriented, people who are focused a lot on themselves. And this is 60% of people in the study claimed that their bosses were self-oriented. Another 49% actually say that their bosses are stubborn, and they would label them as stubborn and then over-demanding. 43% said that about their bosses. 41% said that the boss was impulsive, and another 39% said the boss was interruptive. These are all very interesting labels that really indicate that managers are not always perceived by their employees to be just, fair, and in truth using their power correctly. Now, another study was done which actually found that 46% of managers actually admit that they need to work on their management skills. And this is quite an interesting fact because it seems that bosses and managers, when they are shown this kind of statistics, they are not really surprised. So it's really interesting to note then that while they perceive this as an issue, it's also not so easy for them to admit it, because really when you actually ask these managers about what they should really focus their efforts on in their training or their coaching, they might often say, very overwhelmed, that they need to bring in the numbers. But actually, their people skills are the reasons why they were fired from their job. And the results that they were not able to bring had a large deal to do with the fact that their interpersonal skills, their emotional intelligence, was not really up to scratch. Now, there's a really great piece of research that was done by Talent Smart, and it's really goes into great depth about this subject. And there is a few things I wanted to talk to you about what Dr. Travis Barry really highlights in this study. He is actually a PhD holder and an author, co-author of a best-selling book called Emotional Intelligence. And in his research with over 1 million people, he found that 90% of top performers are actually skilled at managing their emotions in times of stress. They can remain calm and controlled. And this is actually one of the greatest gifts. It is this ability to neutralize toxic people, even those that they report to, those that have power over them, those that are their bosses or managers or supervisors. And this is a very interesting aspect because it really points to the fact that even though it's no easy task to do this, people that are high achievers and high performers in life have learned to develop their emotional intelligence, and they use this as a skill in order to navigate their careers and to become really successful. And this is a really important fact for this seminar, because if you are going to be continuing in a job with a boss, manager, or supervisor that is potentially toxic or showing bad boss behavior, you need to know that you are likely to burn out. And this means that you could be experiencing fatigue, depression, all kinds of aspects of the anxiety spectrum as a result. And you could be running what I've talked about in other videos as the empathic narcissistic dynamic syndrome, where you might be attracted to people that are toxic for other reasons from childhood. Whatever the case, I want you to know, though, that it's really important to look at a way of dealing with this situation And your best option, if you do have a bad boss, is to actually seek other employment. But it's not always really possible. So with compassion and real concern for you, I want you to know that working with a professional will really help you navigate the emotional turmoil that can come from being exposed to this kind of toxic behavior. But success really always requires us to make the best out of a bad situation. And a bad boss is just one of those things. Toxic co-workers is another. Salary that you feel doesn't reflect the work that you are investing into and the contribution you really make is another. So there are many challenges when you are working in organizations. But the key aspect here is to learn to actually understand that success is simply the product of how well you can actually play the hand that you've been dealt, like Dr. Trevor says. And in a few words, this gives us a great image in our minds of those days where you are dealt your hand in a card game and you have to check everyone else's facial gestures to know if they're lying, if they're bluffing, if they are actually going to win the round or not. And it's quite the same in a work environment. You are dealing with people that have themselves all kinds of challenges and all kinds of needs that they are also trying to get met. So it's important to remember that behind a toxic boss is someone who also is looking for validation and wants to know that he is successful in the relationships he's having, in the way he's serving his clients. He just might be going about it in an inappropriate way, and he might be unaware of that. So whatever the case is, you just need to consider that the hand you have at work is just like any other set of circumstances. This is what you've got to work with. So when you have a bad boss and you really can do one thing about this situation to help yourself, which is to learn the style of your bad boss behavior. The boss that you have operates in a certain way that might lead to toxic feelings and to inappropriate interactions. And if you can really analyze and understand that really well, you can study with me a few ways of being able to neutralize this behavior. And there are in fact 6 very specific kinds of toxic bosses, and I've added one more to that to actually give you the clearer understanding of what a narcissistic personality disorder is, because a toxic boss could actually also be another type of real pathological toxic boss type personality, where you also need to know very strategic ways to actually diffuse the toxic interactions. And these will really help you to navigate the situation and maybe even develop the kind of emotional intelligence that you heard me talk about at the top of this training. There really is a skill that we can develop to remain calm and controlled in our emotional states in front of very volatile, very difficult, toxic situations. And in order to learn that, we have to really understand our own emotions well, so that we're not repressing them or suppressing them, but actually using very good boundaries, firm decision making about what's good for us and what's not good for us, and a way of asserting that without creating a defensive reaction in the other person, without being insulting or hurtful to someone who is opposite us. And in a boss situation, when you are the employee, we have to do it diplomatically and respectfully, but without manipulating our own values and our own virtues in order to please the boss in front of us. So these strategies are really helpful, and they need to be very specifically aligned with you and what you're prepared to do, and they connect directly into these different types of bosses. So thank you so much for watching, and if you do want to know more, you can watch the other videos on narcissistics and empaths, how they dance together, these 2 types of personalities or these 2 types of characteristics, and the neurotic kind of aspect to a narcissistic trait is that it can play out and maybe even sadistically enjoy making other people feel inferior and or worthless, so that they can keep propping up themselves, and this comes from a deep injury to the ego. So that video is very helpful, as is the other one, which talks a little bit more about the 8 types of bad boss behavior. As I mentioned, there are 6 classic types. Another one that I've added on, the narcissistic personality disorder, and another one which you will also listen in to find out more about. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Take care, and I hope you're having a great week. Bye-bye.